Hello, my friends. I cannot believe we're already at one of the last panels of the day. And this conversation that we're about to have is going to be so robust and so in-depth in different business models, in different strategies, in different financial structures around one of the largest challenges that we have in this region, around affordability as a whole and affordable housing at scale. I have the great pleasure of introducing Chuck Bean, who I actually met. He's with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and I met you, Chuck, actually through Jack McDougall and a lot of the smart cities initiatives that have been happening around the world, around the region, not the world, with the connected DMV. And so impressed by what you guys are doing with the 24 jurisdictions and a lot of the policies and policy opportunities and strategies that you're putting collectively for a region to excel as a whole. And one of the things I know that you guys have done, I think it was a few months back, was put together a report that shared that there's a gap in our housing, specifically 325,000 units, and which of 75% need to be affordable from the analysis that you've done. So we thought that you would be an excellent moderator of a panel filled with amazing people. So we have Brian Lee from Common, AJ Jackson from JBG Smith, Andrew Trueblood from the DC Office of Planning, and Janet Stephenson from Katerra. So with that, I'll hand it off to you.
Hey, thank you, Seema. Thanks to you and everybody for inviting me, for inviting us. We're glad to be on this wrap-up panel for today. And we know that we are your transition between caffeine and alcohol. So I have a bottle of Bang right here ready to get me through this panel, but I also have a pint glass standing by. Yeah, you hit the 75,000 right, and when I get to 75, 75, 75, you'll know I'm almost done with my opening remarks, and that's when I'll turn it over to Andrew. What I'm going to try to do is frame the challenge at the metro scale. Andrew's going to drill down the challenge at the district scale. And then how are we going to respond to this challenge? We have three great people. I'm going to call on AJ for innovations in financing. We got to do that at scale. Going to ask Brian to talk about innovations in design and management. And then the big kahuna, innovations in construction costs, and we're going to go to Janet. And then once we get there, we're going to have our free-for-all. So we'll look forward to your questions. Hopefully we can answer them as we go. Just a little bit of background on the region. You can see the map behind me. So when we think of our metro region, it's Montgomery and Prince George's in Maryland, but also Frederick and Charles County in Maryland. And Virginia, it's Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William, also Arlington, Alexandria, and the district. My organization brings together, well, this afternoon, it was all the fire chiefs on a conference call today. How are we going to deal with this flooding? Who's going to help who? Who's got some more assistance to cross a border? Yesterday was the police chiefs. Next week, it'll be the transportation officials. But key for our conversation here is we bring together on a monthly basis all the planning directors. And Andrew was the chair of the planning directors committee when we did these regional targets, and all of the housing directors, so they can share innovations in Alexandria, what they're going to do in Montgomery, but also what we need to do at the regional scale. But for all of our work from the government side, who really builds the housing is the private sector. So that's why we're so grateful that we can be here with you all today. So at the metro scale, our metropolitan statistical area is about 6 million people. The footprint that my organization covers is about 5.7 million. So that puts us at about the 6th biggest metropolitan area in the country, after New York, LA, Chicago, and Houston, and the Dallas area. So in this footprint, there's about 3.2 million jobs. And if we were a country, we'd have the economy about the size of Sweden. It's about a $500 billion economy. Transportation, people in this region take about 17 million trips per day. So I mentioned there's about 3.2 million jobs, so people pre-pandemic, maybe post-pandemic, will be coming in and out of their commute for their jobs, but they're taking other trips, other trips every day. Now I was telling Janet before, because Janet's based in Seattle, Brian's based in New York, that it was about 3 years ago when HQ2, when Amazon had the big HQ2 contest, we began thinking, well, this could happen in our region. Our elected officials became pretty nervous about what's this going to mean for congestion. But when we had a former transportation director from Seattle speak to them and asked them to talk about transportation, what did he talk about? Housing. So that's what really got us thinking as the primary challenge. And I think AJ, Andrew, they'll know that throughout our region, housing is probably, if not the #1 challenge, almost always in the top 3 for each of the jurisdictions. So when we think about housing, it's to get the right amount in the right place at the right price points. So to help me remember those things, it's 3 A's. The right amount. So the amount in our region, this footprint has about 2.1 million units of housing right now. My organization does forecasts into the future, and we project that 245,000 additional units will be built in the next decade. But that's not enough. Remember Seema mentioned that 75,000? We really need, based on the jobs that we project, we really need an additional 75,000 on top of that 245 that are built. So that's the amount. The second A is accessible. And in this context, accessible means accessible to the jobs. So that people aren't schlepping in 2 hours, but they're close, they're proximate to their jobs. So all of these new jobs, our target that we've set, these elected officials from all of these counties, 75% of all these housing units should be near high capacity transit. So we have a plan with 208 nodes, Metro, MARC, VRE, the Purple Line, bus rapid transit over the next decade, where this housing needs to go to be accessible to the jobs, especially via public transit. Now the topic for today is affordability, and that's the third of the 3 A's. So the regional target that was set last year by the COG board is that of all this new housing, 75% should be affordable to low and moderate income households. So we don't use affordable housing in the context of that's low income housing. We use affordable to mean affordable to the workforce that we have and we predict in the future. So affordability, if you want to geek out on it, it's about 30% of a household income. Beyond that, it's less than affordable. That's pretty challenging in our region. That's why I'm grateful that we have these folks talking about innovations here. So that's the whole mouthful, our region. Now, I think if you could kind of translate that metro challenge to some of the challenges you're facing in the district. Andrew.
Great, thank you, Chuck, and thank you all for attending. I think I'm excited to join this conversation and to build off of what Chuck said. I think when we think about innovations in housing, in a few minutes, we'll be hearing, or maybe less than that, we'll be hearing about some of the private sector innovations that are needed. But we know that the issues around housing are deep, and we need innovations in the public and the private sector. So Chuck and I are excited to talk about that. I think the way that the region has been handling this, especially for those who know DMV, and the challenges sometimes we have around regional coordination, really I think has been maybe a model for the whole country in terms of how to think about housing across such a broad spectrum of political jurisdictions and interests. And I was happy to be a part of that. And I'll talk for a second about kind of the goals or what we're working on in the District of Columbia. When Mayor Bowser started her second term, in 2019, she made housing, if not, I would say her top priority, but if not her top priority, certainly one of her very top priorities. She knew that we, like many other areas, other cities in the country, are not keeping up with the demand for housing, and that is putting housing price pressures across our entire spectrum of housing, from rental to ownership, from very low income all the way up to moderate and even sometimes upper income families. And so she knew that to get to that, we had been putting $100 million a year every year into our Housing Production Trust Fund, leading the nation in terms of per capita investments. But it's not just policy, it's not just dollars, I should say, that will do it. She knew that we needed to think about the market and to really bend that market and to build more, to Chuck's point. So she set the goal of 36,000 by 2025, 36,000 housing units by 2025, which you might hopefully can see down here. Oh, I'm trying to point, but down below me, that has been really a guiding principle for a lot of the work across government, but also with our partners. It's really helped galvanize interest and as a way to talk about what we need to do and the barriers we need to overcome. But she said that's not just enough. It's not just 36 housing units plopped anywhere. We have to look at where they are in our city. And she asked the Office of Planning to look at equity. And what we found, maybe not surprising, is that where our housing was being built was not equitably distributed. And when you look at where our affordable housing was being built, it was even less equitably distributed, following deep, long-standing patterns of segregation and racist policies. So we she put out a housing report that we helped put together, a housing equity report last October, which came up with actually targets. So Chuck talked about the 75 additional over the next 10 years. I talked about 36,000 housing units in the city between 2018 and 2025. And then we broke that down into housing targets by planning area. Some planning areas have been hostile to any housing, even any housing at all, but even especially affordable housing. And so we broke these numbers down into overall housing as well as affordable housing goals. And really with the idea of better distributing our affordable housing across our city, creating opportunities in all parts of our city for residents of all incomes. So that was a really exciting, I think, moment for us. And I think it helped overcome some of the challenges we faced. It's a way of thinking differently about how we're doing that. We've then taken that and built it into various things. We have a comprehensive plan update before council right now that talks about creating additional density in these areas along corridors at metro stations. We did look a little bit at the single family questions for those who are really interested in that. In DC, it's a little bit more nuanced because we have so much density throughout our city. We have plenty of room to build housing on our main corridors and transit accessible. As Chuck said, that 75% number is really driving a lot of our goals. And then policies. This year, the council actually, because of this work, our council actually passed a tax abatement for high cost areas to support affordable housing in those areas. And so we are pushing for that. We're actually moving right now to change and update our zoning to allow where there's additional density allowed, to push for more affordable housing or higher inclusionary zoning numbers for those who know inclusionary zoning. And we'll be continuing to look at how to remove impediments and barriers to affordable housing. So I could talk about this for a whole hour. I think I'll leave it here for now because that's sort of the big picture. But talking about how you take a regional goal, you take a city goal, you make it a smaller goal, then you move it into policy and regulation. And that's very much what we're doing. And I think the mayor has been a leader and I'm really excited to be a part of that. And maybe with that, I will say, I'll just reiterate what Chuck said, which is government doesn't, at the end of the day, we don't build any housing. We build 0 housing units. So to get to 36,000, we need the other people on the panel to think about how we do things differently, how we bend cost curves, how we bend financing curves and operating models. So I'm excited to hear about that and then have some more conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being a leader in the district and a leader throughout the DMV on these issues. Getting to AJ, first of 3, innovation on financing. I think if you could roll out the model and then help us understand, are we only talking low income or also moderate income? The topic of affordability here, AJ. So AJ, can you take it?
Sure. Thanks, Chuck, and thanks, everyone. I think Andrew did a great job sort of setting that up, and I'm glad he talked about equity because preserving the affordability we have is actually an essential part of preventing displacement and promoting equity. Because the fact is that most of the affordable housing that exists is unsubsidized, unregulated. It's just older B and C apartments. That's the largest single source of affordable housing that we have. And we're losing that housing at a dramatic clip, and there really aren't resources to preserve that housing, even though it is less expensive and faster to preserve what we already have than to try to build new, particularly in the entitlement context that we're in most of the jurisdictions around DC. So what we're trying to do at JBG Smith through the Washington Housing Initiative is build a scalable model to invest private capital in buying that naturally occurring affordable housing in order to prevent that displacement and promote equity. And we created an investment vehicle called the Impact Pool, which I manage at JBG Smith. We've raised a little over $100 million from banks, local businesses, and other investors, and we lend that capital to borrowers so that they can buy those older B and C apartment buildings and commit to keep them affordable. We particularly like to lend to nonprofit borrowers because they have a long-term commitment to affordability. We structured our investment vehicle so that our investors, banks, get Community Reinvestment Act credit for their investment, and also so that a large portion of the returns that the impact pool earns are tax-free. And that allows us to attract the least expensive capital possible. And passing on that lower cost of capital to our borrowers is what allows them to go out and compete in the open market with luxury housing developers and buyers to buy, again, these B and C apartments. And instead of doing value-added renovations or demolishing them and building condos, to preserve the affordability of it. We make loans, not equity investments, so that the upside remains with that borrower. That's particularly important for nonprofits because they can reinvest it in the mission. We get to leverage the entire JBG Smith platform. So we utilize our capital markets expertise, legal, accounting, asset management, et cetera, to really deliver a high capacity market rate execution to these transactions. And that gives the sellers of the real estate comfort, and it allows us to move at the speed of the market, which is particularly important in some of the jurisdictions in our region that don't have things like tenant opportunity to purchase or local jurisdiction right of first refusal, where we're talking about transactions that are closing inside of 60 days. So that becomes, again, particularly important there. Getting your question about affordability and who we're targeting, a lot of lower income families get support through things like the low income housing tax credit or Section 8 voucher programs or other local housing support that the district has. But there are many families in what we call colloquially the missing middle. But if you think about it in terms of dollars of income in the Washington, D.C. area, kind of the families between $50,000 and $150,000 of income who make too much to qualify for most of that support, but not enough to afford housing and the other necessities. And so we're trying to target helping those families as well as families at the lower income end of the spectrum. But there hasn't really been private capital in that space, and so that's where we're trying to go. To another point that Andrew made about equity, we focus on financing housing in places where there's a threat of displacement from gentrification. And we do that both to ensure that everyday people can continue to benefit from the growth of our region, but also to ensure that we're not preserving affordability in places that are low opportunity and therefore expanding inequity in the region. So we can talk more about that later, but I think the locational aspect is very important. So again, it's an innovative way to try to bring private capital to financing preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, which we're losing at a rapid clip in this region, while the other folks in this panel are working towards solutions to really drive the cost curve down on the new construction side so we can actually start to build more committed workforce and affordable housing as well. So I'll kind of leave it there and we can talk more in the Q&A.
Great, AJ. And as we segue to Brian, AJ, if there's a link, there's someone that wants to invest in the fund, maybe you can put that link in the chat. Let's see if that will work. And folks that are listening, if you have a question, you can pose it in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom, and crossing my fingers that we're going to be able to get to it. I know there's one question coming to you about fast track permitting, et cetera, Andrew, that we'll get to after Brian and Janet. So segueing to Brian, what I learned about Common, it's very interesting, very innovative. So can you describe it, how it works, and how we can get it here in the DMV?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Lee. I'm a senior director at Common. So, for people who don't know about Common, just a quick overview. So we're a residential flag and operator. We're a residential brand and operator. And we started off as a co-living company, which is essentially, to put it very simply, housing designed for roommates. And so I would imagine kind of a 4-bedroom unit that is rented out by the bedroom. And the reason Common was born is really because of affordability. As various people on the panel have touched on, affordable housing affordability is a major issue everywhere in the country. Rents have been increasing at a very steady rate while incomes have remained stagnant, and this is especially acute in cities. And so there's just a wide range of people, especially especially middle income people who don't have great housing options. And so Common was born really to think of a creative solution to provide better housing options for that segment of people. And so today we currently operate about 3,500 units across the country. We started in New York. We've been in Washington, D.C. since about 2016. We're in Chicago, we're in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and we have a signed pipeline of about 17,000 units across all of North America. We currently operate 3 brands, and so that's our way of addressing the affordability issue for different housing segments. So Common, which is our first brand, and where the co-living product lives, is really designed to provide more affordable housing solutions for young urban renters. So people who are 35 and moving into 30 to 35 moving into a city for the first time and want to find a convenient, affordable way to live. And then we also have Kin, which is a housing product for young families. So, parents between the ages of 30 and 40 with young children who want to stay in a city, and providing a well-designed, affordable housing solution for them. And then lastly, we have Noah, which is our workforce housing brand. So very similar to kind of the product that AJ is investing in, Class B and C apartments in suburban markets, garden style typically, and providing a great management platform for those residents. So I'll focus on co-living today because I think that's kind of where we've kind of made the most progress in making that an affordable solution. So a quick overview of co-living. So co-living is it's an apartment unit designed for roommates. So, let's say you have a 4-bedroom unit, somebody will rent by essentially a bedroom. They will share a living room, they will share a kitchen. And the value to the renter is that they just pay much lower rent. And so if a studio in an area is, let's say, $1,800, then a co-living bedroom will be priced at, let's say, $1,400. That includes a lot of services. So those units come furnished, and it includes a weekly cleaning service. It includes a shared goods such as toilet paper, paper towels, hand soap. It includes all utilities and Wi-Fi. And so it ends up being a very, very economical living solution for a lot of people. And so we've been, so that's a product that has generated a lot of consumer demand. Today we get about 20,000 leads per month to live at Common. And so we're just trying to build out more supply to meet that demand. And that has, so that's a pretty naturally affordable housing product. And we've been working with a lot of cities across the country to roll that out as an official affordable solution. So how can a co-living bedroom be classified as an affordable unit and help owners kind of satisfy inclusionary zoning requirements? And so we've been working with New York City, we've been working with Washington, D.C. And so we've been working with DC, we've been working with Boston, Atlanta, New Orleans, and I think DC has actually been one of the leaders in making these regulatory changes. The DHCD recently, published AMI levels for a co-living bedroom, which we thought was a very significant step in just creating clear regulations around co-living and how it can, function as affordable housing. So I will leave it there, and we can kind of dive into any interesting points during the Q&A.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. And I invite you to put a key link in the chat if that's of interest. You mentioned a couple different products. And I think after Janet, I'll pose a question to Andrew about co-living and density and what can the district government might do to facilitate it. And make one observation. Andrew, I think there's something like 710,000 people in the district, maybe a little bit more. And people ask, geez, we can't fit anymore. But there used to be over 800,000 people, but the number of people that were in the housing units was different. And so it is possible. And does co-living, is that an innovation that might get us to where we need to go? But holding that thought for a moment, Janet, let's pick up with you. Can you tell us about Katerra, presence that you have in the DMV, and your innovations on driving down construction costs?
Thank you. Thank you all for having me today. Yes, Katerra may be more of a household name on the West and the South. I'm not so sure, but we do have a presence in the DMV. We have part of our sort of Katerra ecosystem, if you will, includes Lord Axe Sargent, an architectural firm with offices in Alexandria, and then some GC presence. We've completed probably about 1,500 multifamily units in the last couple of years. And we're also, given that today at Katerra, which is a phrase I use quite a lot given our extreme growth over the past 5 years, from 0 to over 6,000 people worldwide, we have also part of the technology is, of course, new material. And so mass timber is one of them, and we're supplying CLT, cross-laminated timber, to ATM as an expansion. It's a lighter material, so 3 more floors to create some more office and some more living in a downtown office zone is part of the new trend as well with upzoning. We won't be focusing on that too much since we're talking about affordable housing, but it's an exciting part of the mix. I think one of the things, Kim and Megan started off this morning with HIT Collab talking about how our industry has only really sort of, put in about 1% of revenue into R&D over the course of time. And so naturally, as a consequence of that, have hit a sort of a moment where really shifting that is important. Katerra was founded by people that had come from technology industries and industries that really put a lot more R&D in, were much more savvy and much more comfortable with proven technologies. And one of the things that I find that I talk about quite a lot is some of the innovations that we're using, we talk about being innovations. And when you start talking about innovation, people go risk. But that's not necessarily true. To other industries, they look at what we're doing, and because we're not using proven technologies, it's incredibly risky to them that we're not. So it's really about shifting a mindset in terms of what's proven, what's possible. So many of the things that Katerra is doing really aren't outrageous innovations. They're just proven in other industries, and just it's about time that they came into ours. And Chuck, I haven't got a good acronym with the 3 A's so I'll work on that for next time. But I was trying to think how I could categorize some of the different technological innovations that really are part of what we're doing. And I think another interesting part of what we're really trying to do is hit that scale of operation as well. So I mentioned that we'd grown to 6,000 people around the world in the domestic US. Today at Katerra, we have 4 very distinct divisions of our company. We have a general construction network around the US, just a traditional GC network. So we do all types of buildings from type 1 all the way through to garden walk-up in a way that when we first founded, that wasn't true. We have a mass timber industry that sells you CLT material only, or we can step it right the way up through design assist, through engineering, through design and erection on site with another GC, with design, erection, and the full GC, whichever works for you. So it's very much a national network that works in partnership with your local requirements and with the project-specific needs. We have a renovations group, which is working on a project in DC right now. And then the turnkey, what we call the building platform business. And that's really where we are the giant, how do you design a building as an IKEA, a high quality IKEA set of kit of parts that can be efficiently manufactured, effectively driven to the site, and very quickly assembled. We have increase in productivity through robotics of the factory. We have reduction in waste through reduction of the time and the data being traveled between design, manufacturing, assembly. We have improved performance of materials. We look at the total cost of delivery, not just the construction line item of the unit cost. It's the labor to install it. It's how you design it for manufacturing. But there's also that understanding of the right fit. You know, not all technologies should be used on everything. With mass timber, we can do some really good mid to high rise projects, but you don't want it on a lower project. With a kit of parts, for garden style, you can do 100% product. But as soon as you move into a more constrained urban setting, don't expect 100% product. We have to work with the constraints there. And then the last thing I'll say, because I know my time is running out, which is part of the speed that we're achieving to reduce the cost requires certain things. You know, it enables a speed to entitlement set. It enables more projects to be constructed in a year. Your money can be pulled out and put into new projects. So the scaled operation of that vast amount of units that need to be delivered. But in order to do a fully productized thing, we are going to ask you to have some restraints on what you ask for so that we can be successful with you.
And so, Janet, if somebody here is listening and thinks, we need that building platform, we want to partner with Katerra, can you put something in the chat box about learning more and maybe finding you?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to.
Good. While you're putting that chat box, let's go to Andrew. Andrew, we don't have a lot of time, so take your pick. District's perspective on facilitating fast-track permitting for affordable housing, or helping with that missing middle that AJ talked about, or the district's perspective on facilitating more potential co-living.
So maybe I'll take the first and the last quickly together, which is, you know, it's interesting, both of them end up coming down to very sometimes mundane regulatory challenges. So for example, our DCRA, our permitting agency, has a velocity program that they created that project sponsors could buy into to kind of get everyone together at one time and speed through the process. We wanted to apply that to affordable housing, but they didn't know how to identify affordable housing projects. So just creating a field that then can be connected to our Department of Housing and Community Development, to our Deputy Mayor's office, and even to some of the projects that the Office of Planning tracks, became sort of the biggest challenge. And it's something that we've been able to begin working through and to get some projects to fast track through permitting. So that is happening and something we're looking at. Another challenge is around co-living. Our price schedule that the housing agency puts out it includes studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. It doesn't include a co-living option. So there's no rent levels for that. And we had a project actually at our Walter Reed redevelopment, which wanted to do some co-living, and they worked with them to figure out how you would price that as an option. I think, you know, we want to learn about co-living. There are good things and bad things. It works well in some cases and maybe less well in others, but we didn't want the lack of a price schedule to be why it doesn't happen. So we have been, I think both of these examples have really come out since the mayor's goal and have been examples of how we work from that big picture down into to the everyday regulations and policies.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. AJ, can you drill down a little bit deeper on the missing middle? And what are you looking for in terms of your partners from the private sector? And do you have partners from the public sector, and how do they most facilitate your mission?
Sure. Well, I'll talk about partners. On the private sector side, we're looking for people who will commit to providing some long-term affordability for people in that missing middle category. So we think about it in terms of percentage of AMI, but just for that's kind of, you know, in the weeds housing speak. I mean, generally you're committing to lease units to people who are earning less than $100,000 at rents they can afford to pay without being squeezed. So that's the general, and we get more specific from there, but that's generally what we're talking about. We'll work with nonprofit partners and for-profit partners who are willing to do that. We have a preference for nonprofit partners, again, because when the covenant expires, the profits go back into the mission. but anyone who's willing to help preserve affordability for a minimum of 15 years is somebody that we'll work with. On the public sector side, you know, the district, Andrew's here for a reason. The district has been a great partner. The district created a workforce housing tax abatement for nonprofit owners, and that's incredibly powerful. In this area of NOAA preservation, tax abatement is probably the single most powerful tool that local government can bring to bear, because it falls directly to the NOI of the project, which means it can be leveraged both with the impact pool capital, but also with the first mortgage capital coming from the Fannie Mae's and Freddie Mac's and the HUDs of the world. So there's a tremendous return on that tax abatement to the government. It's a much more efficient way for the public sector to support workforce housing than trying to go into building the units themselves or buying the units themselves on the preservation side. But also, you know, just like as Brian was talking about, there are all sorts of things in the minutia of regulation, and I find that, now again, I'll give credit to the district, that they are committed to the goals that the mayor has laid out, and that when there are issues, there are creative partners there looking to solve them. And it's not just the district, it's, you know, the city of Alexandria. We've had the similar experience there. We did a project with them earlier this year, but it's really that flexibility. Because what we're trying to do in workforce housing preservation, the NOAA side, is get into the market and create a different outcome. And so we have to have the flexibility from public sector partners to adapt to the realities of individual transactions, but at a speed of the market, because sellers are not going to wait, you know, for a NOFA or a 1-year funding cycle. They want to close in 60 days.
Great, thank you, AJ. And Brian, there's a couple of questions about the target group for the housing. I think it has to do with, do you view co-living as the same age bracket, or is it multi-generational? Is there an opportunity for a young professional and an older? But generally, who do you see as the most right target market here?
Yeah, so I mean, it's possible to have a young professional and an older person in a co-living unit. In practice, it doesn't happen that much. Our demographic is very much, it's very much kind of young white-collar professionals. And so our average age is around 29 years old. Average income is around $73,000, obviously depending on the city. And so it's, yeah, that's our core demographic for market rate co-living.
Thank you. And Janet, there's looking to drill down a little bit. There's one question in there, DC and Alexandria. What about Baltimore, or what about other places in the DMV?
Oh, we're all inclusive. We'd be delighted to work with you.
And Janet, there's another question that came up. Will you be using modular prefab or more 3D printers? Hope you understand that question better than I do.
Yeah, actually, no, one of the things that Katerra often says is that we don't ship air. We're not a modular company. We really do focus on panelization and a kit of parts. We have experimented with 3D printing, but really the scale at which we need to work, the printers still aren't quite fast enough. So maybe for smaller products, they work, but for building components, not so much. We focus on panelizing wall panels and putting electrical plumbing already in. We don't fully enclose them yet, but someday jurisdictions will be comfortable with us doing that.
Great, thank you, Janet. I haven't seen the hook yet from SEMA, but anticipating that, I'm going to go to you all for maybe 1 minute. If to accomplish the objectives that you are talking about, what's one thing that the audience should be thinking about? What's one way that they might be able to assist? And open it up to anybody to begin.
Sure, I can go. So I think the one thing that would be really helpful from people in the DMV region, particularly municipal governments, is simply acknowledging co-living and contemplating that in the code. As Andrew was talking about, I think the kind of big picture concept of like co-living being an avenue to produce more affordable housing, I don't think that's controversial whenever we've kind of talk to city agencies about that, I think generally people like the idea, but the devil's really in the details. And so if you're going to do that, then, how does a co-living bedroom get, how does it go through the affordable lottery process? Like, how do you, contemplate a co-living bedroom from a kind of regulatory and code perspective? And so to the extent that city governments can help clarify those regulations, I think that would really kind of help the production of affordable housing and give clarity to developers.
I think, we'll bring that to the district. Well, it's already here. Andrew's here, but we'll make sure that, Fairfax, Montgomery, Prince George's, all million plus. So those are big potential markets. So we'll try to do what we can to get that on the agenda. Andrew.
Thanks, Chuck. I guess I'll leave, acknowledging right now we're in particularly interesting and perilous times, and trying to understand exactly how the markets are going to fall out. I would say it looks like the housing market has been a lot stronger than certainly the commercial office market. And we are looking at new ways of even thinking about in our city, opportunities to support more housing, potentially downtown through office conversions. So I would say anyone out there, no matter what you are traditionally working on, to think about housing and to think about opportunities for housing, whether it's in an office conversion or whether it's in a high opportunity area, thinking about it differently than maybe we would be thinking about it or promoting it even a few years ago.
Thank you, Andrew. Janet.
Sure, I'll go. I've long said we have all the technology and we always will have the technology that we need. It's about human behavior to get it decided on and applied. And so one of the things that I would say is that, change can be hard, and this is new. We've talked about modular and panelized construction, but it's still a tiny percentage of our overall build, and it's still, so you just choose one little thing to do, and it's not just you and us that are interested in doing it. We have to bring your lenders on, we have to bring the AHJ on, we have to bring the workers on, we have to have contract terms that support the delivery in a different place. So come with a good mindset. Don't expect what you've done before and what your experience and what you're used to. Try and work with, let's work together and support ourselves through all of the inevitable challenges that come with change.
Great, thank you, Janet. And that cues up AJ.
Thank you. I would just say, I would challenge everyone to figure out how their organization can be involved. Housing is a business issue as much as it is a social issue, because cities can't grow if they can't house their essential workers, and they won't be attractive places to be if they don't have the vibrancy that comes from diversity. And so given that we're coming out of this period of COVID with even more strain on public resources, there's a critical need for private sector leaders to get involved in trying to be a part of the solution. So think about what your organization can do, how you can really lean into it, because this is not just an affordable housing issue.
Thank you, AJ. Hey, thank you, everybody. Seema, thank you for having us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think I learned a big lesson. Having all of you on one panel, I feel like we could have spent all day. There's so many great insights through what you guys have shared. I'm really, really appreciative. I know there was a lot of questions as well, so I kept it open for a few extra minutes, Chuck. So thank you for bearing with me and being a really fun actual moderator and having some comic relief in the middle of that. You guys closed out our summit. Is it already virtual happy hour, Chuck? That doesn't look like a wine glass. You closed out our summit. We just have our closing comments and our presentation to the Laurie Center for the amount of money that we raised for them because of folks like yourselves, folks like our sponsors and our attendees. So we are very grateful for your presence here, grateful for your conversation. There'll be a lot of follow-ups, I'm sure. So thank you guys so much. And for the rest of the audience, we have one quick session, 10 minutes closing. Please be there, support the Laurie Center. We have a few insights to share and some goodies. See you there. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.